Sometimes people come to me and say, Dr. K, I just want to know if I'm on the right path. And every time I hear that, I can feel what's underneath the question. It's not really about direction. It's about doubt. It's about that quiet, unsettling feeling that maybe you're living your life wrong. Maybe you've made a mistake that can't be undone. Maybe everyone else seems to be moving forward and you're standing still. And the first thing I tell them is this: the right path doesn't to always feel right. In fact, most of the time it feels confusing, slow, and full of uncertainty. Because growth and comfort almost never coexist. When you're genuinely evolving, your brain literally experiences discomfort. The same circuits that light up during fear also light up when you step into the unknown. So when you feel anxious about your direction, that's not necessarily a sign you're lost. It might be a sign you're changing. See, our nervous system loves predictability. It loves knowing who we are, what we do, and how the world responds to us. That's why even painful patterns can feel safer than unfamiliar peace. If you've lived in survival mode long enough, calmness can feel wrong. So when life starts to shift, when you leave a job, end a relationship, or start questioning your purpose, your system panics. It interprets uncertainty as danger. But spiritually, that same uncertainty is the doorway to alignment. There's a strange paradox here. Most people think being on the right path should feel clear and confident. But in reality, it usually begins with disorientation. Think about any transformation in nature: a seed buried in darkness, a caterpillar dissolving inside a cocoon. Those phases look like endings, but they're beginnings. The same thing happens in human life. Confusion isn't failure. It's a restructuring of your inner compass. What makes it hard is that the world doesn't reward that process. Society glorifies clarity and outcome, not the messy middle where you're questioning everything. You scroll online and see people who seem sure of who they are, what they want, where they're going, and you compare your raw, unfinished process to their highlight reel. You think, something's wrong with me. But what you don't see is that every person you admire has gone through their own season of not knowing. The difference is, some people learn to stay present inside the uncertainty without letting it define their worth. So how do you know you're on the right path? Ironically, the answer rarely comes from thinking. It comes from listening, not to your mind, but to your body, your energy, your subtle inner sense of truth. Your body always knows before your intellect does. When something is aligned, there's a quiet sense of expansion. It doesn't always feel easy, but it feels clean, like you can breathe more fully. When something is misaligned, it feels constrictive. You might justify it logically, but something deep inside you feels off. People ignore that signal all the time because the rational mind is louder than intuition. You tell yourself, this job makes sense. This relationship looks good on paper, and you silence the small voice that says, but I feel dead inside. That's how so many of us drift away from our real path, not because we choose wrong, but because we stop hearing ourselves. The modern world has so much noise that silence feels unbearable, yet silence is where direction lives. One of the hardest parts about finding your path is realizing that it changes. There isn't one singular road you were born to follow forever. The right path evolves as you do. What's right for your 20-year-old self might suffocate your 40-year-old self. So being on the right path isn't about finding permanence. It's about staying attuned. It's about asking regularly, does this version of my life still fit the person I'm becoming? That question is powerful because it brings awareness back to growth instead of achievement. The world measures progress by milestones, degrees, promotions, followers, but your soul measures progress by depth. Are you more peaceful than you were a year ago? More honest with yourself? More compassionate toward others? These are harder to quantify, but they're the true signs of direction. And sometimes the right path will isolate you. Because alignment often requires letting go of environments that no longer match your frequency. You might lose friends who don't understand your changes. You might disappoint family members who expected a certain version of you, and it hurts. It can feel like failure, but in that solitude, something essential happens. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You begin to act from authenticity rather than approval. Psychologically, this is a shift from external validation to internal regulation. For years, your dopamine system might have been wired to respond to other people's approval. Every compliment, every like, every success, tiny hits that tell your brain, you're safe, you matter. But when you start walking your real path, that external feedback often disappears. The brain panics because the old rewards vanish. Yet, if you stay with it, a new reward circuit begins to form, one based on integrity, peace, and alignment instead of applause. That's how purpose rewires the brain. It's important to understand that alignment doesn't mean perfection, it means honesty. There will still be days of doubt, procrastination, and fear. Being on the right path doesn't mean the path is easy, it means it's yours. It resonates with your truth, even when it challenges you. The right path will stretch you, not destroy you. It will confront your ego while nourishing your soul. And sometimes, the universe tests you not by taking things away, but by giving you what you ask for just to see if you're truly ready. Maybe you prayed for peace, and then suddenly people stop calling, your calendar clears, and you feel lonely. That's peace arriving in a form your ego wasn't expecting. Or you asked for growth, and life gives you discomfort, failure, rejection, not as punishment, but as preparation. Because spiritual progress rarely looks like success at first. It looks like breakdowns because the old version of you must fall apart before the new one can stabilize. Here is something I tell my clients. Confusion is not a problem to solve. It is data to observe. When you feel lost, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" try asking, "What's shifting within me?" Because sometimes being lost is your system's way of telling you the old map no longer applies. You're moving from one developmental stage to another, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. The identity that used to make sense doesn't fit anymore, and that's not regression. It's evolution. In therapy, there's a concept called transitional anxiety. It's the unease that comes when your internal framework is updating. The same way a computer pauses during a software upgrade, your psyche pauses during transformation. It's slow, it's awkward, and it's supposed to be. So if you're in a phase of uncertainty right now, that's not evidence you're off track. It's evidence that your inner world is catching up with your next chapter. Another clue that you're on the right path. You start noticing synchronicities. Maybe you think of someone and they call. Maybe opportunities appear when you finally stop forcing outcomes. That's not magic. It's alignment. When your mind, body, and actions line up, you perceive the world differently. Your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information, begins to highlight what matches your focus. What used to look like coincidence becomes coherence. You start living in flow. But flow doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean sitting back waiting for signs. It means taking aligned action, doing the next honest thing, even if it's small. The right path reveals itself step by step, not in one grand revelation. And every step you take from authenticity strengthens your self-trust. That's the real compass. Self-trust is how you navigate uncertainty without losing your center. If you've ever felt paralyzed by indecision, it is probably because you've been trying to make the perfect choice instead of the present one. The mind loves control. It wants guarantees. But life only gives feedback. Every decision teaches you something, even the ones that lead to pain. Pain is data. It tells you what doesn't align. When you stop fearing mistakes, you start learning faster. And spiritually, there's something profound about surrender. Surrender isn't giving up, it's giving over. It's acknowledging that you're part of a larger intelligence. Call it God, the universe, consciousness, that sometimes rearranges your life in ways you can't yet understand. When you're on the right path, life will often remove what no longer serves you, even if your mind calls it loss. The relationships that fade, the opportunities that fall through, the doors that close, they're not rejections, they're redirections. Still, surrender is hard because it requires humility. It asks you to trust that not knowing is also part of knowing, that even your confusion is sacred. And when you begin to see it that way, you stop rushing the process. You start treating each day not as a test, but as a teacher. Sometimes the universe speaks quietly. You might not get a clear sign. But there will be a feeling, a subtle but consistent pull toward what brings you peace, growth, and authenticity. Follow that pull. It's not always exciting, but it's real. The right path often feels simple, not dramatic. It's the one where your soul exhales. And here's the most shocking truth. You can't miss your path. You can delay it, resist it, take detours, but ultimately every road circles back to your evolution. Even your mistakes serve you. Even the times you felt completely lost were preparing you to recognize alignment when it arrives. You don't find the right path by thinking harder. You find it by living fully, by showing up, making choices, learning, adjusting, and staying kind to yourself in the process. Because the right path isn't somewhere out there. It's the one you create with every conscious step you take.